Sorry I didn't finish that one. I'm going to be really quick with this one, so I don't want it to be longer than 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go through those, as I said, tomorrow. But we're going to start with the light reactions and then the Calvin cycle. I just wanted to introduce them right now. Okay, so before we get into those, I got to talk a little bit about the electromagnetic spectrum. You might remember from grade 10. The electromagnetic spectrum is the energy that's transmitted in the form of waves. So something like the sun actually emits all types of the electromagnetic spectrum, all wavelengths. So there's radio waves, microwaves, there's infrared, then there's the visible light spectrum here, ultraviolet, X-rays, and then gamma rays are the ones that we're going to talk about. Okay, and the wavelength can tell you the power of those types of waves. So light is kind of in the middle, visible light. So red wavelengths of light are larger, and violet wavelengths of light are smaller, closer together. So they have higher levels of energy in them. Plant cells have pigment molecules that absorb the energy from visible light in order to release electrons from a chlorophyll molecule that then moves through the electron transport chain. Okay, and so that's why I wanted to sort of highlight the electromagnetic spectrum. So just so you can see the different wavelengths of visible light and how they relate to colors as we move through. So we have red as being the longest wavelength, then orange next to it, yellow, green, blue, and then finally violet. Plants are green because they reflect the green wavelengths of light, which I'm going to get to in the next slide here. Okay, I'm going to focus. There's two spectrums here. This is called the absorption spectrum right here, and this is the action spectrum down here. Okay, so I should write that down. Absorption spectrum. Okay, and so what we see here are different pigments that plant cells have in them. Focus mostly on, here it says A and B. It's referring to chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Okay, so chlorophyll A is that first light green one. You can see it absorbs, so we have, in this picture here, we have the short wavelengths of light down here at the bottom and the longer wavelengths of light over here at the top. So the violet wavelengths are somewhat absorbed by chlorophyll A. Then it drops down, and you can see blue and green and yellow are all reflected, and then we have orange and red again are absorbed. So whenever you see this peak, it means it's being absorbed. Whenever you see this furrow or this valley, that means it's being reflected. Okay. Then we have chlorophyll B. It's absorbing more of the blue wavelength. Again, it's reflecting green and yellow, and then it absorbs orange and reflects red. Okay, so that's what those peaks and valleys mean. So what does that mean in terms of the plant? It means, well, as you remember, when I talked about the early morning light has lots of blue pigments in it, so the fact that both chlorophyll A and B absorb down on that end means that photosynthesis will start as early in the morning as possible. Okay, then as the day progresses, all the wavelengths of light are present and being emitted from the sun, and then as it gets to the late hour, the angle of the sun means that most of the sunlight is in the orange and red spectrum. So this means because plants absorb in the violet to blue and the orange to red primarily, that they can start absorbing energy from the sun as early as possible in the morning and end as late as possible in the evening to maximize the amount of time that the cells are undergoing the reactions of photosynthesis to create stored energy for the cell. Okay, they don't absorb any of the greeny yellow wavelengths, and this is why plants look green. Okay, so if you remember from grade 10, when you look at something, if it looks red, it means it's absorbing all the wavelengths of light that are hitting it, but it's reflecting the red, and that's why we see red. Well, plants look green because they're reflecting green and yellow. they don't need to absorb green and yellow wavelengths, okay, because it gets enough energy from the violet, blue, and the orange, red wavelengths. So that's why they don't absorb those colors, because the plant cells don't want too much energy. Like, they want a lot of energy from the sunlight, but they don't want too much energy because it can damage the molecules inside of the cell. Okay, and that's where you can see also on this slide, there's carotenoids. So carotenoids, think of like carrots, like orange. These are pigments that are there to help protect the plant from getting too many wavelengths of light. So they absorb different wavelengths that means that chlorophyll A and B aren't absorbing them. So it acts as a protection. Okay, so that's the absorption spectrum. Below that is the action spectrum. And in the action spectrum, you can see this is measuring the amount of photosynthesis. So if I had a plant and I was just using different colors of light and aiming it at the plant to see how much photosynthesis happens, you can see that plant photosynthesis happens mostly in the violet blue and the orange red. So you see how it kind of, if you superimpose the bottom graph with the top graph, they overlap each other. Okay, meaning that's how you can tell that these pigments have something to do with how photosynthesis happens in a plant. Okay, sorry, one more slide. Here is a chlorophyll molecule, and these chlorophyll molecules are in the thylakoids. Remember, thylakoids are those discs, right? So inside of those discs, chlorophyll molecules kind of pop up out the top like antennae. It's actually called an antenna complex. Okay, and so this tail here, I don't know if you can tell from this picture, it says it's hydrophobic, but if you can tell from the picture, it's basically like a fatty acid. Oops, fatty acid. And so it is the part that sits inside the membrane here. Okay, so the thylakoid membrane is made of a phospholipid bilayer, like every membrane in a cell. So that's how it stays inside the membrane of the cell. And then this part here at the top, here, that is this part. Okay, that's the antenna complex. This is where the electrons are. So a wavelength of light will come in, hit this antenna, releasing the electron, so that it goes through an electron transport chain, and that electron is found in this purple area here. Oops. Here you can see kind of what it looks like. And I'm going to stop now, and then we're going to come back. I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. Okay?